Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself? You get what you need. I got an interesting email this week. He says, thank you for taking my email in question. My girlfriend and I listen to you on the radio, and she respects your opinion as I do. So here's the question. I've been separated for 9 months. I'm working on a divorce. Is it okay to date? I believe it is. But she's not comfortable with being around people who know my divorce is not final. Can you help? He kind of answered it when he said if she's not comfortable, it's not a good gig.
And that is so true. You know, in a relationship, you have to be able to negotiate and compromise when you don't share the same values. And you know me, Carol Jurgensen, she's a.k.a. Carol the Coach. Hey, I don't believe that you should have any kind of relationship with somebody else that's intimate until you have closed out another one. And so his girlfriend has every right to question where they're going in life. And that's important. I stand by those values. You know, this is not related to sexual addiction, but I was talking with a woman today, and she said, I went to the pool. She's about 50, a really nice woman. She said, I went to the pool, and I hung out with two 20-somethings, and I was kind of getting a kick out of them. They were a little hungover. They were talking about how life is so hard, and they were using the F word all over the place. And this other woman came up to one of them and said, I would appreciate if you watch your language, because I've got a 13 and a 14-year-old here at the pool. And so this woman, we'll call her Tracy. Tracy looked at me and said, what do you think about that? And I said, well, Tracy, I want to know what you think about that. And she said, well, I thought that was really kind of inappropriate for her to put these kids down because they're doing what they do, and it didn't bother me. And, you know, I just didn't think it was right. Now, here's what I really think, and this is what I told Tracy. I said, you know, Tracy, the important thing is that this woman stood up for what she believed in. She has specific values, and she needs to be able to share how she feels, what she thinks, and what she believes. That is called assertiveness. And I understand where in a public place she does not want her children exposed to the F word. I appreciate the fact that she stood up for that. I really, really do. Now, I can understand, you know, my middle name is empathy. I could understand where Tracy did not think it was a big deal and felt like this woman had intruded upon their experience. But the bottom line is that when you have a specific feeling, when you have a value, and you feel it's important to stand up for that, it is absolutely okay to speak your mind. What does that mean? That means that you're clear and direct about how you feel, what you believe, and what you think. It's called assertiveness. It does not mean you get your way. Okay? It just means that you spoke up for your beliefs. And so I know that Tracy may have been looking across the office at me and thinking, oh my gosh, not another prude. But the bottom line is, when I talked with Patrick Carnes about sex addiction, and in his training, he tells all of us as professionals, hey, you know what you got to do? You got to be able to talk to these men and women in professional terms and don't use slang. It may be easier to say the word blowjob than it is oral sex, but reference it as oral sex. It may be easier to do A, but reference it as B, because that's professional, and we want people to understand that when addiction has occurred, it has dumbed down your expectations. And so I'm a big believer in talk in proper terms, advocating for what you believe, and standing up for your values no matter what they are, even if I don't agree with them. They're your values, and they're important to you. So now, I got an email from somebody who said, my husband is a sex addict, and our marriage is barely tolerable. He's been distant and has experienced a lot of depression in his entire life. I'm only at a place of feeling like I could again just tolerate married life with him. You know, I'd love to forgive him for his sex addiction, and I pray to forgive him. Yet I still don't know all that I'm forgiving. He denies porn, yet when he was out of town last September, an image of a woman in underwear popped up on his email. My computer was broken, and I had to print a shipping label off his email. I wasn't looking for evidence because I totally believed his statements about no porn, so I was shocked. He told me months earlier that he began looking at catalogs of women in underwear around age 6. Looked at Playboy in junior and high school. Yet he denies it in our marriage. He lost a really good job 15 years ago, but says he doesn't know why. And it definitely wasn't because of ethics. Okay, Carol, is my confusion due to his gaslighting, or should I believe him? Or should I believe he's lying? I am exhausted. She then says, I bought your book not knowing it was you who wrote it. It's excellent advice for healing. As I first began reading it, I thought there's no way he can ever do what you've suggested. I really believe he's not capable. My therapist recommends a polygraph before the disclosure. That's what this woman wants. She wants a disclosure. My husband said he knows he will be asked if everything is written is accurate, and he will say yes. But I believe he's the expert of omission. What do I do, Carol? What do I do when my gut says he is not being honest? What do I do when my gut says he has never been honest? Okay, so here's the deal. You know that I feel like I'm an expert on disclosures. I do them all the time. And disclosures are a way to find out the truth. And if your therapist wants him to do a polygraph before, that will be to ask him, is he going to be 100% honest for the disclosure? You know, sometimes therapists do that because they actually want to know intention. And sometimes they do it because they want to make sure that they don't put you through the rigors of a dishonest disclosure. It's a hard process for both of you. And so if he's going to be dishonest, you might as well know from the get-go. And so here's what I'm going to say, and this is not going to make me popular in the world of partners, but it's the honest-to-gosh truth, and it's a byproduct of the collateral damage of a sex addict lying. Now, we all know, whether you're in a relationship or not, sex addicts lie. Lying is the foundation for addiction in general. That's where the word denial comes from. Don't even know I am lying. And the truth of the matter is that you don't know what to believe. And your gut is trying to protect you. And you've been deceived so much. I don't blame you for feeling like he's going to lie and that he can't be honest. And maybe he can't, or maybe he can, but if he's been prepped by a good therapist who helps to convince him that it is important to tell everything, to get it all out, so that he himself doesn't hold any lies, and he doesn't hold any lies from you, if that's indeed what you want, the entire truth, I don't blame you for not trusting him. And that pre-disclosure poly is going to be important, followed by the post-disclosure poly. And that poly will help you to know whether you can trust him again. And you know, so I said I wouldn't be popular with the partners because your distrust, mistrust, skepticism is normal, natural, and necessary to protect you. However, I work with a lot of addicts who do want to tell the truth. And when they do, they have no intention of lying, and their wives still feel they're lying. I just had a woman the other day that said, Carol, I need a second polygrapher. His polygraphs are coming back true, and I don't necessarily believe it. I want a second polygraph with somebody totally new. Well, I didn't think she was being unreasonable. I thought to myself, yes, she's having a hard time believing that this deceitful, lying, dishonest addict is now in recovery, and he's working hard at being honest, at being transparent, and in being authentic. And for that reason, if she needs another polygrapher to give another polygraph test, I'm going to get that for her. So I actually, you know, I'm from Indianapolis, and we got the greatest polygrapher here in the city, but I went ahead and referred her to Cincinnati because we got other polygraphers here, but I don't know their work, and I'm not just going to turn it over to them. I want somebody who understands sexual addiction. And hopefully he'll pass. If it came out that he didn't, I would be surprised. I'd have to admit that I would be surprised, but it wouldn't be the first time an addict had fooled me. Most of the time they don't, but on occasion they do, and when they do, I'm not surprised because I have good gut, but it's not 100% accurate, just like a partner's isn't, just like an addict's isn't. So I don't blame her. Now, what I'm here to do is make things better for her. Now, you know, tonight we're going to be talking with Elijah. He's a therapist, and he believes that an addict can move towards recovery when they move closer to an understanding of their own feelings, intimacy, and spirituality. So he's going to be sharing with us his thoughts on finding that serenity and the purpose that accompanies that when one works the program. And if you're somebody who's listening, maybe you're not an addict, or maybe you just wish you could find your purpose and passion, you can go to my website, Sex Help with Carol the Coach, and I have this shortcut manual on finding your God-given dream, finding your purpose and your passion. If you're a clinician and coach, you are welcome to buy it and, go ahead and copy the pages. It's for anybody who wants to figure out what is their purpose and passion. But what I guarantee you is that finding your God-given gift, finding your purpose and passion shows up in lots of different ways. So I am really excited that Elijah is going to help us to figure out how to do that. And that's why I decided to have him on the show. I read a blog of his, and I was so impressed by it that I said, okay, this is somebody that I need to talk to, because everybody knows that the first 3 steps in the 12-step program is about finding your higher power, recognizing your life is unmanageable by yourself, and surrendering to that. And I could tell that this was a man who 100% had a good idea of what spirituality meant to him. So Elijah, welcome to Sex Help with Carol the Coach.
Hi there, Carol. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And I told you I was really impressed with that blog that you had done. I could tell you had really thought through what spirituality can mean for addiction and addiction recovery. So tell us a little bit about your story. What made you write that blog?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking that question. So I'll start off with, I'm not an expert in spirituality, but what got me thinking about spirituality is that so many clients, in session, it becomes, it oftentimes comes back to that spirituality, a sense of purpose, a sense of what am I doing here. And for many people, they seek out therapy, not many people, but some people, based on religious abuses or things like that kind of nature. And so there's, they're really questioning their sense of higher power, their sense of spirituality. What does this mean if I've suffered this abuse at the hands of, a faith that I deeply believe in? So that was kind of what got my wheels turning about this topic.
Well, and you obviously have worked with a lot of addicts. You're a therapist and a CSAT, correct?
I'm actually not a CSAT, but I do work with addicts quite a bit. And I do work, so PCS, quite a bit of sex addiction.
Yeah, I send a lot of people to PCS, and I find it to be one of the best treatment centers in the United States. So I just assumed you were a CSAT because you seem to know so much about this topic. And so tell me what you found with addicts who are finding recovery or who are in good recovery. What do you see in terms of their relationship with spirituality?
So I think that one of the first things that I've found is that many people struggle with step one, just believing in a higher power, and what does that mean? And so for many folks who are new to even the idea of being a sexual addict, they know something's not right in their lives, but that's a whole other story too, accepting that label. They're really resistant against going into any kind of 12-step program because of the first step. And it's sort of like, well, if I don't have a higher power, then how can I possibly, go into 12-step and kind of get the help that I need? And so, there's lots of ways to work around that and through the idea of, well, what do you believe? What is your sense of, is there something greater than yourself? When you grew up, what was your experience with religion, with spirituality? And so, common things that people do is they will make the group their higher power if they're struggling with that early on, or they will make, nature their higher power or their sense of spirituality, and they use that. And that just allows them to get started into a 12-step program that can be really beneficial. My belief is that another part of spirituality is about connection with ourselves and connection with people. And so oftentimes there's a spirituality inside of a group meeting like a 12-step where people are really connected and they are helping other people who are struggling, with the same things. With people who are successful in their recovery, they may, for some of them who already have a faith, it's kind of getting back to that. Oftentimes when they show up in the therapy rooms, it's really about, man, my behaviors are so incongruent with what I actually believe, faith or otherwise. And so helping them to reconnect back with, what are your beliefs? What is your sense of purpose? What is your sense of spirituality? And how far away are you with your behaviors from those types of beliefs? And, sometimes they know it, and they know it when they're out there doing things, but just having that discussion to kind of reframe that can be really useful.
Yeah, so let's go over, for anybody who may not be familiar with the 12 steps, can you go over step 1, step 2, and step 3? Because that's the beginning gateway of finding your spirituality.
Sure. And so let me also just say that, I'm not in the 12 steps myself. I'm not well versed in that stuff, but I know how helpful that can be. And you can help me out if I slip here. But I know that step 1 is all about powerlessness and unmanageability, and recognizing that that what you're doing in your life is not a sustainable thing, and that you are powerless to overcome this addiction by yourself. And so the idea of being able to have a group and a higher power to be able to help you to overcome that addiction. So actually, let's see here. If you want to just help me, remind me of, for some reason my brain is going a little bit blank here, Carol. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely okay. So step 1 is recognizing that your life has become unmanageable and a power greater than yourself has to restore you to sanity. And then step 2 is understanding that you need to ask for that help. And then step 3 is about surrendering to it. And you've got this belief system that says, life continues to ask us familiar questions. What's the best way to adapt to this environment? How do you adapt to the struggle, challenge? And what is the best way to live? And so I know that you believe spirituality, that relationship with spirituality, and as you just indicated earlier, it can be a variety of things, is one of the conduits to being able to figure out your life. So now I'm going to ask you, when you look at addiction and compulsive behaviors, what or how does that relate to a lack of spirituality?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it's if spirituality and is about connection with yourself and with your others, then what I've found is that addiction is very much seemingly about running away, about medicating, about getting outside of one's body, about chasing pleasure, about avoiding pain. My belief is that spirituality is actually much more about finding the subtle gradations of life, whether, be from very painful things to really intense euphoria, and embracing more of the full spectrum of life. And I think that goes towards the idea of, answering the questions that life puts in front of you. And oftentimes we get asked the same question over and over, and we wonder why we get stuck in these loops, and we wonder why we get stuck in these patterns. And I found that, working with people to help to slow them down and to get centered in their selves, as far as what are my values, what is going on in my body, what are my feelings telling me, what are the decisions that I've made in my life thus far, my relationships telling me, can begin to help to answer whatever the question is that life is asking us in a way that moves us forward versus being stuck, more in a loop.
Absolutely. And you and I both know that addiction and compulsive behaviors feel so out of control that people don't know how to get out of that loop. And so when you talk about doing the next right thing with clients who are struggling with their own sexual compulsivity, what does that mean?
And so that's a really good question, and I think it means it can mean different things to different people, but a lot of it comes down to, what is the person's values? What's meaningful in my life? What feels right when I do it versus what makes me feel like I need to keep this a secret or live in shame about what I'm doing. And so a lot of it is constrained by, I believe, cultural beliefs of the time as far as what we think is the right thing to do. What I've also found, though, in working with people and their trauma and their background is that sometimes, people's cultural beliefs or the pervading belief of the day is not helpful or can be traumatic, to do to somebody. So what I found is, human beings, we develop and we look for love and we look for nurture and we look for attachment and we look for acceptance and we look for affection. And so even if there's cultural values or societal values that say the opposite of that, and that's just what's accepted, it ends up being, I have found, a trauma to the human psyche. When we are disconnected, when we feel rejected, when we feel less than, when we feel silenced, when we don't have the ability to express our emotions or express our thoughts or our belief systems, there's cultures or there's value systems that say, you should not or don't do this, but it doesn't mean that that's what's best for people. So as far as the right thing, there's a lot of subjectivity, but I've also found that human beings, again, love, nurture, protection, connection, and when those things are thwarted, even if it's the cultural belief, the pervading belief at the time, it can end up being stressful and or traumatic for people.
Yeah, and so obviously you say traumatic to people. And we work, both you and I work a lot with trauma. Now, do you think that trauma can be healed when you develop a relationship with your own self and your own feelings, intimacy, and spirituality?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. One of the most fascinating things, just week after week, is people find healing when they connect with the younger, wounded parts of themselves, and just sort of without fail. And a lot of times, the patterns that people get stuck in different loops, or choosing relationship partners that are not ideal or not good for them. A lot of it cuts right back to things in childhood and what they saw and what they witnessed. And so being able to connect with oneself, being able to connect with one's trauma, to be able to empathize with younger versions of ourselves, absolutely 100%, is a big part of, I think, healing. It's a big part of spirituality. It's a big part of being in tune with who we are, who our community is, who it maybe should be, ideally. But it's a tremendous part of moving forward and being connected, and also, therefore, to me, it's spiritual.
Well, and you have this concept, because we were just talking about doing the next right thing, and anybody who's worked in the 12-step program, oftentimes their sponsor or the program fellowship will say, I know you don't know what you think you need to do, but just do the next right thing. And then you talk about a different concept, and that is failing forward. So talk a little bit about what that concept is all about.
Yeah, so I think that when we try to do the next right thing, because we are imperfect people, we end up maybe failing is a strong word for some people, but we end up failing, or we end up at least not doing what we set out to do. And the idea of, can I allow myself enough space to make mistakes? Can I allow myself enough space to do what's not right in the longer journey to figure out what is right and what is actually going on? And I also think, as far as failing forward, that happens on an individual basis. It happens in our relationships. It happens in our family systems. it happens in our communities and our pervading belief as well, as far as failing forward. And so a big part of it is really it's about figuring things out, but it's sort of like, how in line with what is right am I doing right now? And maybe in 10 years I find out that what I was doing wasn't right, even though it felt right at the time. But I'm probably on a better path there than if I know that my behaviors and my value system are way out of touch.
Okay, so it sounds like you're really asking addicts that are working on their recovery to be gentle with themselves and to recognize that if they do the next right thing and it isn't the right thing, or it doesn't work out for them, or later on they think, oh, I should have done it a different way, that's all a process by which they develop the emotional maturity to know next time what to do differently. And that there really is no concept of failing, because if you fail forward, it just means you move yourself to a better personal growth, more development, if you will.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And sometimes, people are really they're afraid of not doing things right, or they go through an intensive and they say, okay, I have so much information, and now I just I need to put this into practice, and I'm really scared of doing this right. And my first piece of feedback to them is, you won't. You're not going to do it all the way right. And so it's not a matter of, will I do this perfectly? You're not going to do it perfectly. But it's a matter of, and when I don't do this perfectly, what do I do next? And the next right thing might be being in consultation with your sponsor, being in consultation with your therapist, being in consultation with your family, in order to help to figure out what is the next right thing. And it's, to speak to the development piece, a lot of times folks that are struggling with addiction, there is a developmental piece, frozen development. Something happened to them, and they began using drugs maybe at a certain age, and oftentimes their development kind of freezes at that age. And maybe they're functioning at kind of a higher level, like holding down a job, they have a wife, they have a family. But oftentimes once they get sober, whether it's substance, whether it's sex, there's these sort of developmental issues that need to be tended to and need to be addressed. And oftentimes, one of the first places you see that is in their relationships. There might be comments of, they're really immature, or they're really selfish. My belief is that oftentimes narcissism is about that. It's about frozen development. And so when you're younger, you're supposed to be centric. You're supposed to have a focus on yourself. And it's only when you're older and we're adults that there's more of a belief of, well, maybe it's time now that you tend to other people and think about other people. And so when that's not happening, then it can be very frustrating to the people that person is in a relationship with, whether it's their employer, coworkers, their family, their wife, their husband, kind of thing. And so oftentimes that's been my experience. So.
No, and I get that. You work in a treatment center, so you obviously get to work with people intensively. And that is a real luxury to be able to have a concentrated amount of time to help the person to heal, as well as for them to get out of their environment so that they really have time to reflect on what they think, what they emotionally feel, and what they intuitively know. And, it's interesting, Elijah, one of the things I say is that when making a good decision, whether it's a recovery decision or just a life decision, you really need to say to yourself, what do I think, how do I feel, and what do I know? And oftentimes people in recovery, early recovery especially, will go, I don't know what I know. And I say, well, get real quiet and channel what you believe your intuition would say. Because what I know to be true is intuition is really that connection to spirituality. It's that ability to be able to very much channel what might be the right situation for them. Now, how do you tie in one's recovery or healing to spirituality? I mean, what do you advise them to do when it comes to developing their own spiritual self?
Yeah, and so it kind of depends on where they're coming from as far as do they already have a faith? Do they already have a religion? So for some people, it's fairly simple. It's getting reconnected with what already worked for them as far as a church, as far as a synagogue, as far as a mosque. And that's where, they feel connected. They have a sense of spirituality. For other people that are struggling with it, for some people, it's just nature. They go out to a mountain peak, they go out to the beach, they go out to other places, and maybe in solitude by themselves, and they can connect with what's bigger than them and what is around them. I think there's also can be these connecting points really through dialogue. So sometimes group can be a spiritual experience. Sometimes journaling or the arts, there's spiritual experiences that are accessed there when sort of the highest forms of emotion or the lowest forms of emotion are being expressed through plays or music or painting or things like that. To me, going back to spirituality, it's about connection. And am I connected with what this piece of art or music or if this person sitting across from me having coffee is trying to say? Is there a connection there?
Yeah, and so, again, how did you get so wise? How did you figure all this out?
Yeah, I so appreciate that. I don't know that I am, really. I think I've learned a lot from mentors who've taught me, and I've learned a lot from clients. I think that I have experienced, spiritual moments in session with people when I allow myself to be educated. I've found that that's actually, sometimes you can get trapped into the therapist hat. This is my belief, my experience. But when I'm only trapped in the therapist hat, I oftentimes lose the ability, and I'm only the educator. I lose the ability for myself to be educated. So if I've learned something over the years, it's because I've had really good teachers and really good mentors who have done what I've talked about, which is allowing me to fail forward, scooping me up when I've done things that maybe aren't the best decision or the best choice, and said, okay, so this is a different way of going about that, or this is a different way of tending to somebody or understanding what is going on. And then in the therapy room as well, just trying to absorb people's stories to understand where they're coming from. I think there's a lot to be said about the clinical model, about understanding someone objectively, and then I think that most of that gets lost if there's not a human factor in the room for me to not forget that I am part of this healing process, and I can't be a blank slate for this person to project onto. That doesn't work really in my mind. And when I can allow myself to be vulnerable in that way and real in that way with the people that I'm working with, obviously to a degree, there are still boundaries, professional boundaries, but then I can be connected, and there's these moments that I can have of real growth and even spirituality at times.
Well, I think that's inspirational. I believe that when our listening audience, who oftentimes are our clients, hear that they have been the inspiration for a spiritual moment for their counselor, for the group, or for a 12-step meeting, it really helps them to feel like they have a purpose and a passion too. And that 12th step is all about giving back. And so you don't have to go through each step to get to special times when the 12th step just naturally occurs. You're giving back because you have something that other people want. And you don't even necessarily have to own it. You're just sharing it, and you realize how valuable that is. Now, you have discussed that part of being spiritual as being familiar with the feeling of not having done the right thing. And
Correct.
that is so counterintuitive to what people believe spirituality is. They think it's always doing the right thing. So can you share with our listening audience a little bit more, because you shared a little bit earlier, about how doing things that may not have been the right thing can be spiritual.
Yeah, I think that if we follow our emotions can be teachers if we let them. And so when we have a sense of guilt, there's gifts with all of the emotions. And so if we have a guilt that we have erred or we have done something wrong, that can be a really painful and humbling experience. And so through that, through that humbling and through that painful experience, there can be this moment where we sort of connect back or connect with more of what is the right thing, or what we believe is the right thing, or what our community believes is the right thing. And so I think being in touch with humility is a part of spirituality, and it's a part of us failing forward and leaning on other people, to help us find what is the right thing. I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but I think understanding what the right thing is, it's almost always a community thing. So even if you're in isolation, right, and you grew up somewhere with some type of influences, and so understanding what the right thing is almost always in consultation to some degree. It's always group work in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And so you believe that spirituality can absolutely be influenced by one's community, and that's why the recovery program, the recovery community, is so instrumental in not only finding spirituality, but in living spirituality. So can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, about one's recovery community and spirituality?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so so being connected with other people, I think oftentimes, people especially struggling with addiction, they've been burnt before somewhere. They may have walls up. They have a reason that they are medicating, and it's sort of I make the analogy of almost like brushing off the the burn on the tentacles kind of thing, to be able to reach out again to other people. And that sense of being accepted, that sense of connecting in with other people can be a really beautiful thing. Sometimes, again, going back to this idea of sometimes there's developmental things that, that were frozen, you deal with that as well, but that can be part of the failing forward, part of, the struggle and finding, who you are in the context of a given group. Oftentimes it's not all just, sometimes when we think about connection with other people, we think about, oh, well, it's all just blissful, and, that's what spirituality, but oftentimes, there's a struggle or there's disputes, but then again, there's more opportunity there for owning your part, being humble, having the pain of doing something that maybe is not all the way right, and coming back and figuring out what is right and reconciling with people. A lot of that stuff takes place in, group therapy. I believe it takes place in 12-step as well.
Okay, and so your experience absolutely is that spirituality is influenced by one's community. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think that it can't not be. Maybe that's a bad way of saying that, but it's sort of like we are, as people, we're always influenced by each other, and so it's really hard, unless you were raised by wolves or something like that. You're going to be influenced by your culture, by your community, and so your sense of spirituality, your sense of religion, your sense of purpose and meaning, and what does life mean, all of that is heavily influenced by who you grew up around, what their beliefs were, and your ability to connect and how you connect.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that too. Now, the other thing you believe, which I thought was very interesting, and I read it in your blog, is that it's important when you're thinking about, doing the next right thing and spirituality and what that means to you, that the practice of spirituality can occur through ordinary acts. So can you tell me about some ordinary acts that you might deem as spiritual?
Yeah. So the first one off the top of my head is giving to others. I think there's a spirituality in that, and I think there's a natural reward already set up in our brains to be able to give to others when we access that. And then, of course, the next thing is, how we give to others is because sometimes we can go overboard with that and go to the point where it becomes codependent. I think that the next right thing, thinking about how you're living, how does it impact other people with what I'm doing, I think is part of that as well. It's a consideration that that you live, and the ways that you live always influence other people.
And so obviously it's how we give, and it is what we do, and that can be as small as opening the door for somebody and keeping it open, or cutting the neighbor's yard if you know that he or she is ill and they're not really doing very well. And it can be as grand as, helping to lead a spiritual retreat or a 12-step retreat, or, just something that is very, and
the
so
other,
go ahead.
I was just going to mention too. It's also it's giving to people, but I kind of made it seem kind of limited in that way. It's also the way that that you're living your life, as far as even the way that you're tending to yourself, your self-care, the diet. Are you exercising? There's other parts that go into that there's natural rewards for the way that we are living. And I think that tending to yourself and taking care of yourself it's a big part of it as well. If things are really out of balance, I guess that's the other part about my belief that spirituality is about balance. And so if things are really out of balance, life will tell you in different ways, or you want to say God, or however you want to characterize that. But so, for example, if one part of your life is too heavy, so if you're for some folks that I've worked with, lots and lots of hours at work, and so that means their families, get compromised. The time with them, when the pacing of your life is too fast, you tend to not slow down enough to think about what's going on, to be mindful. And I think mindfulness and spirituality are connected as well, and your relationships tend to suffer and other things tend to suffer. So a lot of, in my mind, spirituality and doing the next right thing is about finding balance as well. What is life asking me? What are the questions? And am I answering them in the right ways through my behaviors, through the way that I'm conducting myself, through trying to live more close within my value system? And I'll just share one other small piece about that. I think that oftentimes we're not 100% living with what we believe in our behaviors. So there's oftentimes a little bit of dissonance or a little bit of discord in that to a lot, and it can kind of vary, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes on a weekly basis, but the idea of using that tension or that guilt or whatever the feelings are to come back closer into your value system and what is right.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you there. As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting that you said that. I know you're familiar with Patrick Carnes. And one of the things he says is if we're not in alignment with a true balance, we oftentimes find ourselves being too busy. Now, in addiction, that meant that you were always looking for ways to act out, to find time for the addiction, and that robbed yourself of that ability for self-care, and it robbed yourself of resting the brain, and then last but not least, it robbed yourself of healthy relationships. And so in recovery, sometimes men and women can get so engulfed and engaged in recovery practices that, again, they find themselves too busy, not getting to rest the brain, lack of self-care, not getting to spend the time they need on their relationship. So I really appreciate the fact that you said that is one form of really taking care of yourself and improving your sense of spirituality, because we all know that spirituality is most obvious when we're quiet and we're reflective and we're in appreciation. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they're, and I was listening to, I can't remember which one it was, but it was a little bit ago, one of your blogs, and you had said, you said that, and I agree with that a lot. And I think sometimes, it's being able to get quiet and tune in to the voice that is speaking within us. And I think that's what you were speaking to. You can call it intuition, you can call it the spiritual voice, you can call it God or God-like voice. But I think all of us have that ability within us to quiet ourselves and to get in touch with that thing that is guiding us in the ways that we probably should be going.
Absolutely. So now we have to begin to close up our interview. And I just thought if you would, because I do so endorse PCS. I think it's amazing for individual recovery. They have a great couples program. I love Earl. He's amazing.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about where you're located, what services does the center offer, and if you can, how people can get a hold of PCS.
Sure. So PCS is located in Scottsdale, Arizona, and so we have an intensive which is fairly well known, and I'm very biased. I'm part of the intensive, but I've just watched week after week the healing that takes place, and just giving kudos to both the Earls, Marcus and Ralph. They have put together, I believe, an incredible team here. It's an incredible environment to work in, and I think that the people, the clients that come here, end up having pretty big breakthroughs in the week that they spend here if they're doing the intensive. And so we have different modalities that we offer, including EMDR, their somatic experience. There's other modalities. I think we have one clinician that is trained in DBT. There's psychodrama. There's group therapy. And so that mix is it's pretty profound, and we use the Maryland model as well. And so there's the intensive, and then there's also outpatient. And so I think myself and most of the other therapists work both in the intensive and have an outpatient, folks to come outside the intensive as well.
Yeah, and you've been there, gosh, how many months or years?
Well, so it's coming up on 3. So I haven't been here a tremendously long time, but yeah.
And if people want to find out more about PCS, they can go to PCS at PCSEarl, EARLE.com, and that phone number is 480-947-5739. And I'm just curious, do you know the website for PCS?
Actually, let's see here. I think if you give me one moment, I can take a quick look.
Yeah.
To be able to locate it. I don't have it right offhand, but and on that website, while I'm doing that, is there's a number of we have blogs up there for people to read. We have a layout of our schedule as far as the intensive. So it's just PCSEarl, EARLE.com is the website for people to visit.
Well, thank you so much, and I really do. I mean, when I saw your blog on spirituality, I knew that I needed to speak more about this. So I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wisdom, and wish you continued success, because I can tell you right now, as a therapist to another therapist, You are a gentle and kind person who allows people to be themselves, and that means they can make mistakes because that's only going to move them forward into finding their higher sense of self. So I so appreciate that, Elijah, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
All right. You take care and have a good day.
Thank you. You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye. So that, again, was somebody who really believes that spirituality is imperative in making a difference in your recovery. I happen to agree with it, too. And so to my atheist and agnostic friends, hey, spirituality can be being in nature. It can be knowing the power of a group. And it can be knowing your own intuitive sense of self. I'm going to share a little story with you. I have a practice where every Sunday morning I lay in bed and I ask God what he or she or it has to teach me. And oftentimes I get messages like, slow it down, Carol, or take a day off, Carol, or listen to your gut, Carol. They're just really wise messages. And one of the things that people have challenged me on is, well, how do you know that's not you, Carol, talking to yourself? And I guess, one, I believe that spirituality is in me. So if it's me talking to myself, it is spirituality. It is my higher power. It is God. But more importantly, I do believe that when I surrender to what my higher power wants for me, it will always be good. Okay. Fast forward to I was really angry at my husband. He had yelled at me because it was time for him to put up a picture, and I just happened to remind him after we had a back-breaking Saturday, raking leaves and moving rocks. So he's doing this picture thing with his father, and he pulls the picture off the wall, and he makes a giant hole. And I didn't say anything, but he went bonkers. My husband is a perfectionist. It just drove him crazy. He made this big hole. And so he starts cussing, and he's mad, and he even uses the Lord's name in vain, which he doesn't do, and I don't appreciate. And he yells at me, and he's yelling at me, and I'm thinking, who did I marry? This was like our 4th year of marriage. I don't deserve this. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't pay for this. So I get mad, and I get quiet, and I don't talk to him all the way home from the lake. Actually, I went to sleep in the car, and we have this thing. We don't do that. Well, I'll fast forward to the next morning, Sunday morning. I'm laying in bed, and I hear my higher power say, you want to know what to do? Take better care of your husband. And I start arguing. I'm not taking better care of him. Are you kidding me? He cursed at me. He cussed at me. I'm not doing nice things for him. And again, I heard my higher power say, take better care of him. So I went downstairs, got him a cup of coffee, brought it up to him. I don't even do that, right? I've never brought him coffee in my life. And I wake him up and I say, hey, honey, do you want a back rub? And this is, of course, after the night before where I wasn't talking to him. And he looks at me, shakes his head, yes. I could tell he thought, who in the heck has possessed her? Well, I got him that cup of coffee. I rubbed his back. We went to church, and we had the nicest day ever. And I was able to shift that energy. So I'm going to ask you to listen to your higher power, too, because it never fails. I promise you. Okay, I got 20 seconds to remind you there will only be one of you at all times, so fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. And if you want that Finding Your God-Given Dream, it's on Sex Help with Carol the Coach, my website. You make it a great week, and I'll see you next Monday for more Blog Talk Radio, Sex Help with Carol the Coach.